Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management technology and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project podcast episode, I welcome back the Ceresys Freight Desk Manager, Chris Longner. As you may remember, Chris is responsible for managing the Ceresys team, who is responsible for arranging freight pickups with our shipper, customers, vendors. Today, listeners will learn on this episode what is an inbound routing guide and what are the benefits to a frequently updated inbound routing guide. On this episode, Chris will get us all on the same page by stating what is an inbound routing guide in freight. Chris then lays out what are the key considerations of an inbound routing guide shippers need to know. After explaining the inbound routing guide considerations, Chris then will share why it's crucial to follow and remain compliant to an inbound routing guide for both vendors and any services providers working on the shipper's behalf. And finally, Chris will provide some information on how technology is making the use of an inbound routing guide more digitized, user-friendly, and easier to comply with by all parties. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Chris, thanks again for being back here on the Freight Project Podcast. We're really excited to have the listeners hear from you once again. I was just looking at the analytics, and you're still number 2 most listened to podcast, but you are quickly, I think in a couple of weeks, going to pass Stephen Rao, who has the most listened to podcast so far.
How does that happen?
Well, I think you just have really good tips, and our audience, they really do enjoy some of these tactical tips hearing from our practitioners. And your expertise as manager of the freight desk, you're working with our vendors and suppliers of our customers, to route inbound freight. And I think inbound is just something that is a part of shipping, but a lot of shippers just seem to kind of take it for granted, and they don't think of it. They think more of when in their planning of their forward logistics. And I get that it involves their customer, right? But I know that, there are some anxious customers of ours who, when they come to us, are super, super happy that we can help them with inbound, because we bring, I think, to them some sunlight and some strategies that maybe they haven't thought about just based on our experience, and they've really been relegated to using kind of an internal document, and they hope that they can update it. They hope that they can distribute it. And it's called the inbound routing guide, and I want to get on the same page with how we define that. So for our audience's education, how would you define an inbound routing guide?
Sure. On its most basic level, it is what Ceresys and most other 3PLs, for that matter, need to properly route shipments the first time to our customers or your customers. Basically, it is a sheet of paper with some very basic information that we are going to be requesting from them in order to get their everything in the first time, in order for us to not to have long back and forth email communications about certain pieces of information. And in order for you to be ready when you give us a call, that you don't have to set the phone down to go look up a PO number or dimensions or, go put the freight on a scale. The inbound routing guide is a tip and some tricks for our vendors who are submitting freight inbound into our customers, that just tries to get it right the first time. And we aren't going that far outside of industry standards. There's just some basic guidelines for them.
Okay. So it's really kind of like maybe, let's say you work in finance at your company. Your manager or the CFO may have some standard operating procedures that they've built. For example, I know one of the tasks you have for 2019, and I'm sure that shippers experience this at any new year, is kind of relooking at your own knowledge base, your own documentation, and kind of seeing, is that still up to date? Is that current? And working with your team to get that up to date as well. So, as shippers kind of look at the new year, and all of us naturally kind of assess what we did last year and how we can improve and reach our goals for 2019 that we stated. They're going to be updating that inbound routing guide, and they may be putting some more focus on that. And of course, we help bring focus to that, but there are shippers out there who aren't yet working with the 3PL like Ceresys to help manage inbound freight moves. So when they're putting together this inbound routing guide for their company, what are some key considerations that you would offer up to them that they should include or should put into that inbound routing guide, maybe that you see is often missing or is just need to haves?
Sure.
That a shipper should consider?
Sure. Let's start with the needs to have, and then I'll provide some tips for some nice to haves, but we'll save them some heartache at the end.
Okay.
The need to have is obviously where the freight's picking up. A need to have is where the freight's dropping off. And that includes full company name, address, zip code, city, state, the whole nines, very basic. And then what is it that they're shipping? So that's piece and pallet count. That's dimensions of the freight. That's weight of the freight. And that is a description of the commodity. Ideally, if you have an NMFC number, that will help our team route the freight more accurately, because we have that very accurate individualized descriptor that the NMFC number provides. And then from there, we'll put the shipment together, and we'll get the inbound order completed. However, there are some things that could be added in there as well in order to make it easier on our customers and make it easier for the relationships between vendors and customers. To make that freight move a little bit smoother. Some of those tips and tricks to have, make sure that you're including a PO number or a sales order number or some sort of reference numbers if the customer is providing that to their vendor to make that inbound shipment. Let us know if it's stackable or not. That helps the carriers, understand capacity if the freight's going to be stackable, and allows us to understand volume and whatnot. Is there any additional accessorials? Is this a residential pickup or delivery? Are we going into or out of a limited access facility? Some of those things like that really help us, understand what we're shipping. And then also be clear as to who's paying the bill. That should have gone in my needs to have section, but I looked that over as I look at my routing guide. But who's paying for the freight? Be accurate, let us know who we're charging, so we can make sure that right bill is being sent out and that right invoice is being sent out to the proper parties. So that to me is kind of what the key considerations are. Once again, it's not going outside of industry standards for the most part, but just some kind of nice tips and tricks and nice to haves that will help you out.
Well, good. And I think when it comes to, in the marketing department, I look at analytics and I kind of look at trends, and I think shippers are really tasked with doing a heck of a lot more than ever before, at least from my perspective over the last 6 years, kind of looking at the industry with little resources. And it's not that freight volumes aren't increasing or that more resources aren't needed, but, often executives kind of look at freight as a cost, kind of like your electricity bill, and do whatever you can to lower that. I want to lower labor. I want to do it with as little people as possible, as fast as I can. And so often they, work with partners who can kind of add those resources without the company themselves having to hire maybe an additional inbound specialist to kind of really, hone in on the best practices and deal with it. And so often, when we bring on a new customer, and I'm thinking especially about maybe like the wholesale distributors that we have who have thousands of vendors who are are, requesting pickups and sending inbound freight to that wholesale distributor. The company who partners with, say, somebody like a Ceresys is really going to put a lot of trust in that partner. And, our freight desk agents are going to be given maybe whatever that copy of the inbound routing guide is that the company has developed internally before partnering with us. And that, will hopefully ensure full compliance in whatever the inbound guide stipulates. But why is it then important to follow the inbound routing guide for us at Ceresys, for our customers, so that they continue to, trust in that their inbound freight is going to be taken care of? And what issues can arise perhaps if we deviate from that guide? Are there instances where it is okay to deviate, and why would it be?
Absolutely. That's kind of a lot of question there. I'll break that down into some small parts here. So yes, we go over with our new hires that we bring on here, kind of the inbound routing guide, so to speak. We do so in order to make a consistent, trainable, scalable service that we're providing. We don't want to necessarily deviate from that, because then not all the proper information is being gathered. It is extremely important for my department to provide consistent service from one freight desk agent to another, so that the experience you get with a tenured individual is similar to the experience that you get from someone that we're just bringing on, because the questions, the format, the way that we approach an email or a phone call is consistent between those two parties. And I think it's important to note that here at Ceresys, we have a service quality program that helps ensure that these questions are being asked, that the transactions being repeated back to our caller, that we are asking the appropriate probing questions, via email or a phone call, to ensure that the information that we are gathering does comply with what is in our routing guide. Now, if we deviate from that, we are starting to get back into the old practice of not obtaining all the proper information, making assumptions based off of some shoddy previous experience that you may have had from back in the day. Just knowing or assuming that you know something is harder and harder to do the larger a company scales. And that's what we're trying to get away from now, because contacts change, situations change. Deviation is only dependent on the notes that are in our customer or our vendor's file. So if you want to make sure that we, always get piece count, if you want to make sure that we always add insurance, if you want to make sure that we always enter a PO number, doing some of those things that, are not uncommon, but sometimes can deviate from the guide. Make sure that we know that. Contact your customer teams. If you are a Ceresys customer, let them know that you want to add some special notes to your account to let us, properly ensure that we're grabbing all your information, even if it does slightly deviate from the routing guide. Did I answer all those?
Yeah, I think so. And
okay.
I guess what I'm thinking is sitting there going, okay, we have this extreme experience about managing inbound freight. We have a whole team dedicated to that called our freight desk. You happen to manage it. That's why you're here, obviously.
Yes.
And it is somewhat like a call center, but it's a lot of folks manning phones and emails, really moving freight as efficiently as possible. But one of the biggest shifts that I've seen is the use in technology to really streamline that process. I think you as a manager or any, manager at a company would say, okay, my greatest resource is my people, but how can I maximize their job and optimize them. And I think what we settled on and what we were able to do thanks to our in-house development team and what I call Gerald Bird's Army up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is, they built what we call our vendor module, right?
Love it.
And yeah, it's really streamlined a lot of our customers, vendors' experience with Ceresys, their experience with our shipper customer. Our vendors, our customers' vendors who are wanting to book an inbound move to the customer can log in right into our TMS, the Ceresys Rater, and schedule it themselves. I think we actually, we sort of use that, the full boat Rater for our own people to book it on their behalf. But we're really encouraging our customers' vendors to use this portal. Why are we making that move, and how can that vendor portal or technology for our shippers' vendors aid in more effective inbound freight management?
Absolutely. When I came on the company about 3 years ago, I heard about this, but it wasn't overly utilized. It wasn't overly promoted. It didn't seem like, but as you referenced there, Adam, yes, it is something that we're kind of looking to do a little bit more of, and we just maybe have found some of the right customers to utilize it on. But anyway, to get back to your question there, why is it important? It is important because, you, the vendor of our customers, have a lot more of a hands-on experience in routing of the freight. Our hold times are minimal for the phones, and our turnaround times are quick on emails, but you do not have to submit an email. You do not have to make a phone call. You can do all of the routing of an inbound shipment to one of our Ceresys customers through the vendor portals from the comfort of your own computer. It takes you longer to type up an email than it will to enter in the information, and conversely, longer to sit on hold and talk to us, than it will to fill out the vendor module, vendor portal. The vendor is more in charge, and there's less lost in translation. So, we are playing essentially a game of telephone from what our customer is sending to our vendor, and then our vendor is sending into us. If we can cut out some of those steps, they can free flow that information in a much more efficient manner, where they are in control. The vendor is in control of the output that they send out. To me, it is an extremely efficient approach. And in this modern customer service age, self-service is the key to happy customers. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, people were more content with picking up the phone and email to contact a call center like what we have here at the Freight Desk. But those times have changed, and a lot of individuals want self-service, and this is your opportunity to get that and maximize the efficiencies on both Ceresys' end and on the end of the vendors as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bank of America. I just use my phone to deposit that check, and I don't have to go see a banker or nothing. I just get it done wearing my pajamas in my house if I want to. And I don't know how many vendors are out there booking freight in pajamas, but if that's what you want to do, you can do that, and no one is there to see it or judge.
Absolutely.
So feel free to request pickups in pajamas. Actually, we could do a pickup pajama party. That's going to be the new. Oh my goodness. Well, hey, Chris, thanks for being on today. And since we're here, kind of at the first part of the year, got any either trends or things in inbound freight that you might want to impart upon any shippers that are listening today, other than keep calm and carry on? And if you got some troubles, maybe take a look at Ceresys. What could you offer maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from an inbound routing perspective, Ceresys is in a unbelievable spot right now. Our team, we have undergone a lot of turnover, but all good. We're mostly all good. And we are in a position now, as we have trained and ramped up some new individuals, with training them to this specific routing guide, that we are in an unbelievable position to make sure that every call and email that comes in is handled consistently across the board. It's not necessarily a trend on the industry. I think what we're doing here at the Freight Desk and with our service quality guides and with our understanding of contact center metrics that will assist in this process of reaching ultimate efficiencies, that we are ahead of the game in that. And as we've kind of come out of a seasonal lower period and are ready to crank it back up for the year, we are in an unbelievable position to service you consistently across all boards, phone calls and emails on inbound routing of freight.
Yeah, well, that's where it's at. It's all about consistency, but I also think what you bring to the table and what's super important, especially in a 3PL environment where we are a third-party partner, is responsiveness and that customer experience.
Yes.
And that experience extends not only to our customers, but as well as their vendors who are making inbound freight moves. And of course, naturally to the carriers, a natural partner for all of us. And so thank you for positioning our team well to handle the year of the customer and to continue to give everyone who's involved with you a great experience. The inbound routing guide is a great framework to have everybody on the same page so that we can do that. So thanks for letting us know a little more about the inbound routing guide and how, technology is a great streamline component whenever you're trying to be efficient. So we'll see you again on the next Freight Project podcast, Chris, where we'll talk about a little more details because that's what the people want, where we'll squarely focus on missed pickups and how folks can avoid
Absolutely.
those. So take care, and we'll see you on the next Freight Project podcast.